You'd think moving to a peaceful, wide-open ranch in the middle of nowhere would bring calm. That's what I thought too, until I met her. It was just my third night at the new place when I was awakened by pounding fists slamming against my front door. The clock blinked 3:04 a.m. At first, I thought it was an emergency, maybe a lost traveler or something serious. I threw on my jeans and flannel, grabbed a flashlight, and opened the door. But it wasn't an emergency. It was Karen, the infamous HOA president, wrapped in a purple bathrobe, fuzzy slippers, and a clipboard clutched to her chest like it held the Constitution. "You can't just let the grass grow like that," she screamed before I even had time to say hello. "This isn't a farm. You are in violation of HOA Lawn Regulation 2.5. I stood there blinking in disbelief. My ranch had acres of open land, untouched, natural, and beautiful. The reason I bought it was to escape city codes, noise complaints, and yes, HOAs. Or so I thought. "Ma'am," I said, trying to keep my cool, "it's 3 a.m. Can this wait until—" "No, it cannot," she snapped. "I've already filed a complaint. You have until sunrise to mow your lot in diagonal crosscut patterns. That's our HOA standard." I was stunned. Diagonal cuts? Sunrise? On land that had never seen a lawnmower in its life? "Are you out of your mind?" I said bluntly, stepping forward and shining the flashlight on her clipboard. "There's no way this is enforceable. I just moved in." Karen's lips curled. "You should have read the rules before buying. The HOA maintains aesthetic uniformity. It's in the handbook. And don't think being new gets you a pass." Then she did the unthinkable. She picked up her phone and dialed 911. I laughed. "You're calling the cops because I didn't mow the grass the way you like?" She looked me in the eye and said, "It's a threat to neighborhood order." That's when I knew I was in for a war. 15 minutes later, 2 deputies rolled up. Lights on. No sirens. They looked tired. One of them had a coffee in hand and a stain on his shirt. Clearly not expecting to deal with HOA drama before dawn. Karen ran toward them like she'd summoned an army. "There," she cried, pointing at me. "He's hostile and non-compliant. He refuses to follow the neighborhood landscaping guidelines." The taller deputy, probably in his 50s, gave me a look. I nodded toward my unmowed field. "She woke me up at 3 a.m. because I didn't mow diagonally." The deputy sighed so loud you'd think he lost a bet. He turned to Karen. "Ma'am, this isn't a criminal matter. If you have a real concern, you can file a civil complaint." "No. This is an HOA-registered community. He is in violation." The second deputy leaned toward me and whispered, "She does this. Don't worry." I almost laughed out loud. After 15 minutes of back and forth, the officers apologized, gave me their cards in case Karen escalated further, and drove off. Karen fumed and muttered something about bringing the HOA board into this. That's when something clicked in my brain. See, what Karen didn't know, what almost nobody ever expects, is that I'm not just some dude who bought land off a whim. I'm a real estate attorney. Not only that, I specialize in property law, title disputes, and, get this, HOA dissolutions. And from the moment I moved in, something had been itching at me. The paperwork was odd. No welcome packet. No recent votes. No board contact info. Just a wrinkled list of rules that looked photocopied from the 1990s. So while Karen went back to bed, satisfied that she'd ruined my night, I sat down with a fresh cup of coffee and opened the documents I got with my deed. That's when I found the loophole that would destroy her entire little empire. The HOA that Karen claimed to represent? It was outdated. Illegitimate. Expired, in legal terms. The community charter had been established back in 1998. But it was never renewed after county ordinance changes in 2010. Legally speaking, the HOA had no teeth. No power. No authority. And Karen? She was just a neighbor with a clipboard and a power complex. By sunrise, I had pulled the county records, checked the HOA status, confirmed the lapse in filing, and downloaded the dissolution process. I'd done more legal prep in 4 hours than their board had done in 15 years. The irony? She called 911 to punish me for not mowing. But I was about to mow down the entire HOA. All I needed was one document. One letter. One notice to the rest of the neighborhood. And by tomorrow morning, Karen would regret ever knocking on my door. The morning sun hadn't even cleared the ridge when I printed the legal paperwork. Karen probably assumed she'd won, that I'd be out there at dawn, dragging a mower through tall prairie grass like a kid in detention. But instead, I was stapling my HOA termination notice to a community bulletin board just outside the mailboxes, the very one Karen updated weekly with notices like, "No dandelions allowed," or "All fences must match beige." It felt poetic. You see, under county law, if an HOA fails to renew its charter, maintain a functioning board, or hold annual public meetings, it automatically enters an inactive status. Once that happens, any resident can petition for dissolution, especially if the HOA continues enforcing rules despite being legally dead. And that's exactly what Karen was doing, acting like she ruled the neighborhood, all while her little regime had been defunct for over a decade. I didn't just post the notice, though. I went one step further. I knocked on every door on the 2-mile ranch loop and personally handed residents a copy of the legal findings. Most people were shocked. Turns out, Karen had scared everyone into compliance over the years, threatening them with fines for parking trucks in driveways or letting their porch lights stay on after 11 p.m. One elderly couple whispered, "We thought it was illegal to have a woodpile." Another rancher told me Karen made him repaint his barn twice because the red wasn't HOA red. They had no idea her power was imaginary. By noon, I'd spoken to 12 homeowners, and 10 had already signed the consent to dissolve form. That was more than enough under county rules. I just needed one more cherry on top. So I filed everything at the county clerk's office, had it stamped, notarized, and returned home with a legal sledgehammer in my briefcase. But I wasn't done yet. See, HOA Karen had scheduled an emergency board meeting that evening. The irony? There hadn't been a Rayall board for years. It was just Karen, her catty friend Brenda, and some guy named Steve who hadn't even lived in the area since 2019. But she insisted on calling it a board meeting, complete with folding chairs and sugar-free lemonade. So I went. Right at 6 p.m., I pulled up in my truck, parked on my own unpaved driveway, because, finally, I could, and walked down to the clubhouse where Karen held her little meetings. She was already standing at the front, adjusting her reading glasses and scowling like a high school vice principal. Well, she said when she saw me. Here to finally comply? I smiled. No. I'm here to dissolve you. A few neighbors chuckled. Karen didn't. I beg your pardon? I pulled the stamped documents from my folder and handed them to her. This is a certified HOA dissolution package. Per county regulations and state law, your HOA charter is expired, your enforcement actions are invalid, and as of 2:14 p.m. today, the HOA is formally disbanded. She stared at the paper, blinking furiously. Brenda gasped. Steve, well, nobody really knew why Steve was there. You can't do this, Karen muttered. I'm the president. You were, I said, calm as a lake at sunrise. Until the board failed to renew its articles in 2010. You've been running a fake HOA for 15 years. That's borderline fraud. She lost it. This is illegal. This is sabotage. You can't just come in here and bulldoze everything. I raised a brow. Says the woman who tried to get me arrested at 3 a.m. for not mowing in crisscross lines. The room fell quiet. One of the older ranchers stood up, Mr. Callahan, I think his name was, and said, Karen, we've had enough. I lost $100 repainting my deck because you said gray wasn't rustic enough. Turns out, you never had the right. Brenda fumbled with a cookie plate. Steve quietly disappeared. Karen's face turned red, like a pot about to boil over. She tried calling the sheriff again, but this time, nobody responded. The same deputies who'd shown up the night before? They already knew what I'd done. One of them had even given me the name of a paralegal to help speed up the filings. Karen had run her mouth one too many times. By the end of the meeting, nearly every resident had a smile on their face. The HOA sign started coming down the next morning. The approved grass height posters were pulled. People parked wherever they wanted. Freedom had returned to our little ranch loop. And Karen? She packed up and moved within a week. Rumor has it she tried starting another HOA at her new place. Good luck with that. I spent the next few days doing exactly what I moved here to do, ride my horse at sunrise, let my dogs run wild, build a fire pit, and not worry about the angle of my lawnmower lines. I didn't just reclaim my peace. I reclaimed an entire community's peace. And all it took was 3 minutes, one letter, and the legal weight of truth. The next few days were the most peaceful I'd had since moving in. No pink warning notes on my porch. No friendly reminders shoved into my mailbox about non-regulation grass height. And no Karen lurking around the edges of my property with her binoculars pretending to birdwatch while she took photos of my lawn edges. The neighborhood felt like it had breathed a collective sigh of relief. I walked out each morning with a cup of coffee, boots in the dirt, and took in the smell of cedar and hay without worrying about who might report me for having a clothesline or a blue garden hose instead of a tan one. For the first time, my land felt like it was mine. But I knew Karen wouldn't let it go that easy. She was the kind of person who didn't just want power, she needed it. Like oxygen. The thought of her HOA empire turning to dust because of one new guy with a printer and a legal file must have been eating her alive. Sure enough, on the 4th day after the dissolution, a certified letter arrived. It was from Karen herself. It wasn't signed President anymore, just Concerned Neighbor. Inside were copies of old bylaws, citations from the expired charter, and a letter that started with, "You may think you've won, but legal battles take time." She even attached a map showing all the violations she still expected me to correct, like trimming my tree line to fit within the 5-foot clearance rule that she invented back in 2009. It was desperate. Sad, even. But I wasn't about to give her a reason to say I was harassing her. So I didn't respond directly. Instead, I posted a public update on the community board. To all residents, the HOA has been legally and permanently dissolved. Any claims or demands made in reference to the now-defunct HOA are not legally enforceable and may be considered harassment. Let's enjoy our freedom. Sincerely, your neighbor. Within hours, 5 more neighbors posted their own replies. One shared a picture of his kid playing in a sprinkler, previously banned due to water pressure strain. Another showed off his newly painted mailbox, neon green with racing flames. The community was coming alive again. But Karen? She wasn't done yet. That Saturday, at exactly 7:30 a.m., I saw her walking toward my driveway with a clipboard in hand and a man following behind her. He looked official, button-up shirt, shiny shoes, big sunglasses. For a second, I thought she'd somehow hired a private inspector. I stepped outside, calm and steady. "Morning, Karen," I said. She didn't even greet me. Just turned to the man and said, "This is the lot." You can clearly see the unpermitted fire pit, the illegal fence height, and... The man held up a hand. Ma'am, this isn't under HOA jurisdiction. I'm from County Code Enforcement. We've already received the dissolution papers. Karen's smile dropped like a rock. But I called and submitted a complaint. The inspector turned to me. Sir, we got your file. Everything looks in order. As long as you're not dumping chemicals or building without a permit, you're fine. Looks like this is just a neighbor dispute. Then he looked at Karen and said, and those don't involve us. She stood there frozen. I could almost hear her mind short-circuiting. She had tried every tactic, fear, paperwork, threats, even calling in outside forces, but none of it stuck. Because the truth was simple, she had no power left. As they walked off, I heard her mutter, "This neighborhood is going to fall apart." But it didn't. It thrived. Kids rode bikes down gravel roads without worrying about HOA patrols. Someone started a weekend barbecue meetup. A retired veteran built a small greenhouse out back and started giving away tomatoes and lettuce. The ranchers, the real ones, finally started putting up windmills again. You could see flags flying proudly, different styles, different colors. Everyone brought a little bit of themselves back into their land, and the neighborhood became what it should have always been, a community, not a controlled colony. I kept my distance from Karen after that. She still lived 2 houses down. Still peeked through her blinds. Still walked with her chin raised and arms stiff like she was on some invisible HOA patrol. But she never dared knock again. Some say she started writing letters to the state HOA Federation or calling lawyers. Others say she just sits on her back porch complaining to no one in particular about how the neighborhood's gone to the dogs. But most people don't even notice her anymore. They're too busy living freely. As for me, I spent one more week building the fire pit I always wanted, dug a pond out back for my dog to swim in, and finally bought a sign for my front gate. It reads, "Private property. HOA free zone. Enter happy or don't enter." And that's how I turned a 3 a.m. power trip into a legacy of freedom. 1 letter. 3 minutes. 0 regrets. It wasn't long before the local paper caught wind of what had happened. One of the residents who ran a small blog wrote a detailed post titled, "The Man Who Ended HOA Tyranny in 180 Seconds, and that post went viral across the town. People outside our ranch-style neighborhood started showing up to take pictures of the Freedom Ranch, a name we definitely hadn't chosen but quickly embraced. I became a bit of a legend, though I never asked to be. I was just a man who loved his land, wanted to be left alone, and refused to bow to pointless control. Karen, meanwhile, was losing ground fast. After the HOA dissolved, her only remaining influence came from her reputation. But the problem was, that reputation had turned sour. People began speaking up about how she had fined them for porch swings, for wind chimes, even for chalk art on their driveways. Her former allies on the board ghosted her. She tried to organize a neighborhood preservation group, basically a rebranded HOA, but no one showed up to the meetings. She posted flyers, no one called. She emailed old neighbors, most didn't respond. You could feel it in the air. That invisible fear that used to linger around her. Gone. Replaced with a strange kind of relief. People started waving again. Grills were fired up on weekends. One guy even played guitar in his driveway, something she'd once threatened him for doing after 6 p.m., quiet hours, she had said back then. Now, the music played until the stars were bright. As for me, I decided to put my legal background to better use. I wasn't just going to stop at my street. I began helping other communities figure out how to review and, if necessary, challenge outdated HOA charters. People called me to speak at town halls, asking how they could protect their rights as homeowners. What I learned shocked me. There were hundreds of communities suffering from the same silent tyranny. Paper HOAs formed years ago, with expired charters, no legal enforcement, and yet still operating on fear and routine. All it took was one person willing to say, no more. One night, I got a knock at the door. Not from Karen, she hadn't spoken a word to me since the county inspector left. It was a couple who had just moved in, looking unsure. They asked if I was the guy who broke the HOA. I laughed and invited them in for coffee. They'd heard rumors that Karen was still trying to pass around private rules through email, threatening new neighbors with fines if they didn't keep lawns trimmed per regulation. I told them exactly what I told everyone else: she can say what she wants. Doesn't mean it's law. They smiled, and before leaving, the husband said, "You've made this place feel like home again." That hit me. Because that was what it was all about. Not the lawn. Not the fence. Not the porch light colors. Home. The freedom to live on your land the way you choose. To raise your kids without fear of anonymous fines. To build a swing set, host a barbecue, raise chickens, or grow wildflowers without worrying if they fit into someone else's version of aesthetic harmony. Karen still tried to hold on to whatever scraps of power she could find. At one point, she filed a small claims complaint for emotional distress, claiming I had ruined her peace of mind and community order. It got tossed before it even hit a court date. Another time, she called a local news station, trying to paint me as an anarchist who ruined a once beautiful community. But when the news crew showed up and saw the laughing children, the yard sales, the cookouts, they never aired the piece. It didn't fit the narrative she wanted. Eventually, she just stopped. She put up a for sale sign 6 months later. When the U-Haul pulled up to her house, a quiet celebration swept the street. No one threw a party, no need. But we all watched from our porches, cups of coffee in hand, as the woman who once tried to control an entire neighborhood packed her last box and drove away. She didn't say goodbye. No one expected her to. Her house sat empty for weeks. Then a young family bought it, a couple with twin boys and a golden retriever who immediately ran through their backyard with joy. They didn't put up security cameras. They didn't ask about rules. They just lived. And that's all anyone really wanted. As the sun set that day, I looked out over my land. The grass, still taller than HOA standards, waved in the breeze like a flag of quiet rebellion. My dog lay at my feet, a cold drink in my hand, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel watched. I felt free. And all it took was one line in a dusty charter. 3 minutes in front of a county clerk. And a refusal to be bullied by someone who confused control with community. People still stop by and ask, "You really dissolved an entire HOA in 3 minutes?" I smile every time and say, "Yep." Because sometimes, it only takes one person to break the chain. And when that chain snaps, the whole neighborhood can finally breathe. Let me know when you're ready for thumbnail text. 8 or 15 image prompts. Description, hashtags, search tags. I'll generate them instantly for this story.